It started out like any other morning in our quiet suburban neighborhood. The sun had barely risen, and a soft golden light spilled over the neatly trimmed hedges and pristine driveways of the cul-de-sac. I had bundled up my 6-month-old son, Micah, in his light cotton blanket and decided to take him out for a gentle stroll in his stroller. The air was crisp, the birds were chirping, and for once, it felt like a rare moment of calm. I had no idea that within the hour, everything would change. As I walked past the meticulously landscaped homes, I felt a familiar tightness in my chest. It was a tension I had grown used to living in this war-run community, an unspoken pressure to conform, to smile, to follow rules that often felt more about power than peace. And the face of that pressure was Karen Wallace, head of the Homeowners Association, self-appointed watchdog of our neighborhood, and, as many joked behind closed doors, a self-righteous tyrant in yoga pants. Karen had clashed with nearly every family on the block over one thing or another: grass height, mailbox paint, barking dogs, trash bins brought in 2 minutes too late. But for some reason, she had taken a particular dislike to me. Maybe it was because I worked from home and didn't dress presentably during the day. Maybe it was because I didn't attend her wine nights. Maybe, as I had come to suspect, it was because I had once dared to question a petty fine she tried to impose over a hanging flower basket. As I turned the corner near the community park, I saw her standing in her driveway, arms crossed, her lips pursed over the rim of her giant travel mug. The steam from the mug curled into the air, and I could smell the bitterness of her brew from 20 feet away. She wore her usual morning uniform, oversized sunglasses, perfectly coordinated athleisure, and that smug aura of someone who believes rules only apply to others. Our eyes met briefly. I nodded politely and pushed the stroller a little faster. She took a long sip of her coffee, then, without warning, called out. "You know the park isn't open before 8, right?" she said, loud enough for a couple of nearby neighbors to hear. HOA Guidelines, page 6. I turned slightly, not stopping. "Just walking the path, Karen. Not entering the park," she scoffed. "That path is part of the park." "Same difference." I didn't reply. I didn't want a confrontation. Not with Micah right there, sleeping peacefully with his tiny hand curled under his chin. But as I passed her driveway, I heard her mutter something under her breath. I glanced back. She was watching me like a hawk, gripping her mug tighter. I didn't think much of it, until I heard hurried footsteps behind me. "Hey," she called, suddenly closing the distance between us. I turned, startled, my hand instinctively reaching to adjust the stroller's canopy. Before I could say anything, Karen raised her arm, and with a sudden, deliberate motion, flung the contents of her coffee mug in my direction. It happened in a blur. The dark liquid arced through the air, a horrifying stream of heat and rage. I screamed and yanked the stroller to the side, but some of the scalding coffee still splashed across Mika's blanket and the edge of his cheek. He let out an immediate, high-pitched wail, sharp, pained, primal. Everything stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. My hands trembled as I ripped the blanket off him, checking his face, his arms, frantically feeling for burns. There was redness on his cheek, and his sobs pierced through me like knives. I looked up at Karen, stunned, horrified, shaking with disbelief. She was frozen in place, her face drained of color. Her mug was now empty, her hand still suspended in the air. And then I saw her eyes, wide, locked not on me, but just past me. I turned. Across the street, standing beside a black SUV, was Officer Miguel Alvarez. Off duty, but still in uniform. He lived just 3 houses down and had been walking to his car, keys in hand, when the whole thing unfolded. His expression was unreadable, but his stance said everything: alert, disapproving, authoritative. Karen lowered her arm slowly, her mouth slightly open, as if words had deserted her. Her gaze darted from Mika's crying face to the red blotches on his cheek, then to Officer Alvarez. He stepped forward calmly but with clear purpose. "Is everything okay here?" he asked, though the question felt rhetorical. Karen stammered. I didn't mean, it was an accident. I thought she was. You threw hot coffee on an infant," he said flatly. No, she protested. It spilled. I tripped. I didn't see. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You aimed at us, Karen, I said, my voice shaking. You shouted at me, ran up behind us, and threw it. You meant to do it. Karen's face twisted. She was breaking HOA rules. She always. Alvarez raised a hand, silencing her. That doesn't justify endangering a child. Micah was still sobbing, though his cries had softened into whimpers. I cradled him gently, shielding his skin from the breeze. My own shock had started to give way to a rising, seething fury. Not just because of what she'd done, but because she stood there, even now, trying to justify it. I'm calling this in, Alvarez said. You need to come with me. Karen's composure finally cracked. Her shoulders slumped, and for the first time, she looked less like the queen of the cul-de-sac and more like what she truly was, just another person whose entitlement had finally crossed a line. As the paramedics checked Micah and confirmed the burn was minor but would need treatment, I sat on the curb, holding him close. Alvarez gave me a reassuring nod. Karen was already being questioned by two other officers who had arrived at the scene. The neighbors, previously hidden behind curtains and blinds, had started trickling out, whispering to each other, their eyes darting from me to Karen. What had started as an ordinary morning walk had turned into something surreal, something nightmarish. But as I looked down at my son, now dozing in my arms after being calmed by the paramedics, I knew one thing for certain, Karen had finally revealed who she truly was. And this time, there had been a witness she couldn't silence. She didn't say a word at first. The moment the steaming coffee left her hand and splattered across the stroller canopy, she froze. My brain didn't even register what had just happened, I only knew my baby was screaming. A horrible, high-pitched cry that pierced through the morning air like a siren. I lunged forward, heart in my throat, yanking the stroller toward me and frantically unbuckling the straps. My hands shook as I lifted my baby into my arms, trying to see if the coffee had actually burned her skin or if the cries were pure shock. The baby's cheeks were red, but not from the coffee, thank God. It had soaked her blanket and some of her clothes, but the thick stroller canopy had deflected the worst of it. I clutched her close, rocking her instinctively, whispering soothing nothings while my own fury boiled just beneath the surface. Karen stood there, mouth slightly open, coffee cup still clenched in her hand, dripping. She looked around, anywhere but at me or the baby, her expression flickering between smugness and sudden panic. That's when I noticed her eyes lock onto something behind me. She stiffened. Her hands dropped to her sides. It was like watching a statue animate and then freeze again in real time. I turned slowly, afraid of what else was about to unfold. That's when I saw him, Officer Ramirez, our neighborhood beat cop, the one who'd been walking the community trail near the park. The one who'd seen it all. He stood just a few feet away, his mirrored sunglasses reflecting the scene with eerie detachment. He hadn't drawn his weapon, hadn't shouted, but the authority in his posture was unmistakable. And he had his body cam running. Karen blanched. Her superiority complex didn't vanish, but it cracked like glass under pressure. She opened her mouth to speak, probably to launch into some twisted justification, but Ramirez cut her off before she got the chance. Ma'am, he said sharply, you just assaulted a child. That word, assaulted, landed like a hammer in the silent space between us. Karen flinched, suddenly aware that this was real, that her entitled outburst had crossed a legal line. She shook her head quickly, as if that could undo everything. It was an accident, she tried to say, voice brittle. She startled me, she was being rude, I didn't mean. You threw hot liquid on a baby, he said flatly, stepping closer. I saw it with my own eyes. The footage is on my camera. This isn't about what someone said to you. This is about your actions. I was still holding my daughter close, but my hands were steadier now. Her sobs had softened into hiccuping gasps, and I pressed a kiss to her damp forehead. Relief was battling fury inside me. I wasn't going to let this woman walk away like she always had, bullying neighbors over lawn heights, mailbox colors, and now, apparently, retaliating against infants. Karen looked at me then, and I saw the old fire returning. Her lips curled into that condescending sneer I'd seen so many times at HOA meetings. You people always think the world is against you, she hissed, eyes darting between me and Ramirez. This is just another ploy for attention. I'll speak to the HOA board about this. You go ahead and do that, Officer Ramirez said, pulling out his notepad. But right now, you're coming with me. That cracked her composure completely. You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president. I've lived here for 25 years. I know the chief of police personally. I don't care if you're the mayor, Ramirez replied. You assaulted a minor. You're being detained pending investigation. You have the right to remain silent. He read her rights as her face turned beet red and she sputtered with indignation, still too stunned to do anything but argue. A few neighbors had gathered by now, drawn by the shouting and the siren-like cries. I saw Mrs. Kellerman from across the street. She gave me a subtle nod, her eyes wide with disbelief. I could almost hear the gossip network lighting up already. Ramirez called for backup to take Karen in, and soon another squad car rolled into the cul-de-sac. As they handcuffed her, she was still insisting that this was all a misunderstanding, that I had provoked her. But no one believed her anymore, not with the body cam footage, not with the baby's soaked onesie, not with the steaming remains of her tantrum pooling on the pavement. After they drove off, Ramirez turned to me. Do you need medical assistance for the baby? I don't think it touched her skin, I said softly, but my hands were trembling again. I'll still take her to urgent care, just to be sure. He nodded. Good. We'll file a full report, and I recommend pressing charges. I will, I said without hesitation. He stayed with me a few minutes longer, helping gather what Karen had thrown, my spilled diaper bag, the ruined blanket, and made sure I was okay to get to the clinic. Before he left, he said, this wasn't the first complaint I've heard about her. But this is finally something that sticks. By the time I got to urgent care, my daughter was calm, dozing softly on my chest. The nurse confirmed she was fine, thanks to the stroller's design and the fact that the coffee had cooled somewhat on the way down. Still, I couldn't stop replaying the moment, Karen's eyes, her hand, the way the cup arced through the air. I stayed up that night thinking about it all. About the HOA meetings where she'd belittled people. About the passive-aggressive notes left on front doors. About the time she tried to find my neighbor for putting up a rainbow flag. It was always power with her, always control. But this time, she went too far, and she did it with the wrong people watching. The next morning, the HOA's group chat lit up with shocked messages. Someone had already posted the arrest video. Karen's title was stripped within hours. The board distanced themselves publicly, and the police department confirmed the investigation was ongoing. I wasn't sure what the legal outcome would be, community service, maybe probation, but one thing was clear. Karen's reign over our neighborhood was over. And every time I looked at my daughter's calm, sleeping face, I felt something powerful rise up in me. Not fear, not anger, resolve. No one, no matter how entitled, would ever threaten her again.